The soft hum of the restaurant surrounded Darius, but he couldn't focus on the conversation around him. The table before him had an intimacy to it, lit only by the warm glow of a candle, flickering in rhythm with his racing heart. Across from him, Simone, the woman he had shared 5 years of his life with, sat anxiously, her rich caramel skin glowing under the soft light. Simone's deep-set brown eyes were locked on his, her nervousness palpable. She fidgeted with the corner of the napkin, barely able to meet his gaze. A small velvet box rested in her hands, her fingers twisting the fabric. Darius could tell something was coming. "Darius," she said, her voice a soft whisper that cut through the silence. I need to ask you something." She hesitated for a moment, as if waiting for him to stop her, but Darius said nothing. He simply stared at her, unable to guess what she might say. The room seemed to stand still as she slowly opened the box, revealing a delicate diamond ring, sparkling in the dim candlelight. "Will you marry me?" she asked, her voice shaking with vulnerability. "I want to spend the rest of my life with you." The words echoed in Darius's mind. He could see the future in her eyes, a life built on love, but for some reason his chest tightened. He had always loved Simone, but the thought of making that kind of commitment sent a ripple of fear through him. His thoughts swirled with doubt. Was he really ready for forever? Simone looked at him, her breath caught in her chest, waiting for an answer. But Darius, for the first time in his life, didn't know how to respond. His mind screamed yes, but his heart felt differently. He had spent years with Simone, and yet something inside him was holding back. I can't," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes widened in shock, and she froze, as if the air had left her lungs. "What?" she whispered. "What do you mean? We've been together for 5 years. I thought we were on the same page." Darius felt his throat close up, words stuck in his chest as guilt washed over him. "I'm not ready for marriage," he said, his voice cracking. "Not yet." Simone stared at him, the shock on her face turning into a quiet devastation. She reached for the box, closing it slowly, as though the world was slipping through her fingers. Without a word, she stood up, her delicate features now twisted with hurt. "I don't understand," she murmured, almost to herself. She turned and walked away, leaving the ring box on the table, as Darius watched her disappear into the night. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. His heart felt heavy with the weight of what he had just done. Simone walked alone through the dimly lit streets of the city, the cold air biting at her exposed skin. The city was alive around her, the distant sound of car horns and chatter faint in her ears. But Simone couldn't hear it. Her mind was still back at that table, where Darius had crushed the hope she had placed in him. "Will you marry me?" The words replayed in her head, but now they were empty, hollow. She wrapped her arms around herself, the ring box heavy in her pocket. Her heart ached, and the pain was sharp. She had loved him, truly loved him. She had built her life around him, and now it felt like all of that had been for nothing. She had given him her heart, only for him to reject her in the one moment she needed him most. Her footsteps quickened as the tears began to fall, blurring the lights ahead of her. She tried to wipe them away, but they just kept coming, each one another reminder of her heartbreak. Why had he said no? What had she done wrong? Wasn't she enough for him? Her phone buzzed in her bag, pulling her from her thoughts. She dug it out, barely glancing at the screen. It was a text from Kira, her best friend. "I'm here for you, always. Let me know if you need to talk." Simone felt the sting of loneliness as she read the message. She wanted to reach out, to tell Kira everything, but part of her couldn't bear to speak the words aloud. She had been so sure, so convinced that Darius was the one. But now that certainty was gone, shattered by his rejection. She turned a corner and found herself standing at the entrance of a quiet park, a place she and Darius had come to talk and laugh. It used to be their spot. She sat on a bench, folding her arms tightly over her chest, trying to keep the chill from her bones, but the ache inside her was worse than any cold. How could he do this? The question echoed in her mind. How could someone she had loved for so long, someone she had trusted with her heart, betray her like this? As she sat there, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on her, she made a decision. She would not let this define her. She would not let Darius's rejection break her. She would pick up the pieces and move on. Slowly, she wiped the last of her tears away and stood, the weight of the ring box in her pocket, reminding her that it was time to let go. Darius sat alone in his apartment, the city lights outside his window flickering like distant stars. The silence of the room felt oppressive, as though the world had abandoned him. His mind was a swirling storm of regret, replaying the moment he had rejected Simone over and over again. He could still see her face, the confusion, the hurt, the devastation. Why did I do it? The question echoed in his mind like a relentless drumbeat. He had always loved her, but now, with her gone, it felt like his world was falling apart. He had been unsure, afraid of the commitment, but now he was left with the consequences of his hesitation. His phone buzzed on the coffee table. He stared at it for a moment before reaching for it, his hands shaking. It was a message from Jenna, the woman he had been seeing behind Simone's back. She had been his escape, the distraction he had needed when things with Simone felt too complicated. He didn't love her, but she had provided the validation Darius had been craving. He opened the message. "I think we need to talk." Darius frowned. He had known this was coming. He had been living in a bubble, pretending that everything would work itself out, but reality was a harsh teacher. He quickly typed back, "What's up?" Her reply came moments later. "I've met someone else. I'm moving on." His chest tightened as he read the words. Jenna had always been a convenience, someone to fill the space when Simone wasn't enough. But now even she was gone. He had lost both women in the span of a week. Darius set the phone down, his mind spinning. His life was crumbling, his career was on the rocks, his personal life in ruins, and the woman he had loved for so long was slipping away. It was his fault, and now he was paying the price. He stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the skyline. He had let fear control his life, and now he was left with nothing. The emptiness in his chest was all-consuming. He wanted Simone back, but he knew it was too late. She had moved on, and he had no one but himself to blame. As he looked out at the city, a harsh realization settled in. Karma. It had a way of working itself out. He had made his choice, and now the universe was delivering its answer. He had pushed Simone away, and now he would pay the price for his cowardice. Simone's life was slowly beginning to take shape again. The first few days after Darius's rejection had been the hardest. The hurt, the betrayal, it all weighed on her heart. But she refused to let it define her. She had been through too much in life to let one person's indecision break her. She had always prided herself on her independence, and now, more than ever, she needed to hold on to that. She threw herself into her work, focusing on her career with a laser-like intensity. Slowly but surely, the pieces of her life began to come together. Then came Robert. He had been a colleague at the firm, someone who had always admired Simone from afar. He had never pushed, never made her feel uncomfortable. But when Darius had pushed her away, Robert had been there to offer support, his kindness and patience a balm to her broken heart. At first, Simone had been hesitant. She wasn't sure she was ready to open her heart again, but Robert had been different. He respected her space, and when the time was right, he made his feelings known. One evening, after a particularly difficult day at work, Robert took her out for dinner. As they sat at a quiet table in a cozy bistro, he looked at her with such warmth and sincerity that it took Simone by surprise. "Simone," Robert said, his voice soft, "I know you've been through a lot, and I respect that, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, no matter what. You don't have to go through this alone." Simone looked into his eyes, seeing the depth of his feelings. For the first time since Darius had walked away, Simone felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, something better. "I'm ready, Robert," she said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "I'm ready to move on." Robert smiled, his relief palpable. They spent the rest of the evening talking, laughing, and slowly, Simone allowed herself to believe in love again. It felt different this time, more solid, more grounded. Darius couldn't escape the crushing weight of his decisions. His life had unraveled in a matter of weeks, and he was left with nothing but regret. The woman he had rejected, the one who had always stood by him, was now with someone else, someone better. Robert. The thought of him made Darius's blood boil. But it wasn't just Simone. His career had taken a nosedive too. The projects he had once managed with ease were now falling apart. His boss had started to question his commitment, and the opportunities that had once been so abundant now seemed out of reach. Darius knew he had no one to blame but himself. He had let fear control him, had sabotaged the one good thing in his life. And now, as he sat in his office late one night, staring at his computer screen, he felt completely alone. The silence in the room was deafening. His phone buzzed again, another message from Jenna. "I'm sorry, but we need to talk. I think I made a mistake." Darius stared at the message, his fingers hovering over the screen. He had been so focused on Simone's rejection that he hadn't even realized how much he had been taking Jenna for granted. Now she was gone too. And yet, the void in his life seemed to grow with every passing day. He picked up the phone, his thumb hovering over the reply button. But in that moment, he realized that it didn't matter. It was too late. He had lost everything. The woman he loved, the career he had worked so hard for, gone. Simone's transformation was slow, but it was steady. As the weeks passed, she found herself smiling more often, feeling more confident, and embracing the future she had once feared. Darius's rejection had almost crushed her, but now she realized it had been the push she needed to truly find herself. Robert had become a steady presence in her life, and as time went on, she realized just how much he had to offer. He was patient, understanding, and supportive, everything Darius hadn't been. Robert respected her independence, but he also showed her what it meant to truly share your life with someone. Simone had found herself falling deeper for him, the weight of her past finally starting to lift. One evening, after a romantic dinner at Robert's favorite rooftop restaurant, he turned to her with a smile, his deep-set eyes filled with warmth. "Simone," he began, taking her hand in his, "I don't want to rush anything, but I want you to know something. I'm in this for the long haul. You've been through a lot, and I'm here with you. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are." Tears pricked Simone's eyes, but they were tears of joy. In Robert's eyes, she saw something she hadn't seen in Darius: true love, untainted by doubt. She had found someone who appreciated her, who made her feel valued. It was more than just healing. It was love in its purest form. As Robert's words settled in, Simone realized that she was finally ready for a new chapter. She had spent too long waiting for Darius to choose her, and now she knew that she had already chosen herself. Robert was the man who would stand by her side, and she was finally ready to take that next step. Simone leaned forward, her lips curling into a smile. "I'm ready, Robert. I'm ready to move forward with you." Robert grinned, pulling her into a warm embrace. "I'll be here, always." Simone knew that this was the beginning of something real, something lasting. It wasn't about replacing Darius. It was about reclaiming her life and her happiness, and she was finally at peace. Darius had no one left. His career had hit rock bottom, and the people he had once trusted were now avoiding him. His phone had become a stranger, buzzing with messages he didn't want to read, and yet he couldn't stop himself from checking it. It was as if each notification was a reminder of how far he had fallen. His relationship with Simone, the one that had once meant everything to him, was now nothing but a distant memory. She had moved on with Robert, and he couldn't fault her for it. He had lost her, and it was his own fault. The sting of that realization was a constant ache in his chest. But there was another loss he wasn't prepared for. Jenna, the woman he had been seeing behind Simone's back, had also moved on. Her text that night had been the final blow. As the days passed, Darius began to see the full weight of the choices he had made. His life was a mess of broken relationships, lost opportunities, and endless regret. He had thrown away the woman who had truly loved him, and in doing so, had set off a chain reaction that had destroyed everything he had worked for. He couldn't escape the feeling that karma had come for him. It was like a shadow, following him wherever he went. He had rejected Simone, and now he was paying the price. There was no one left to turn to, no one who cared enough to help him pick up the pieces. As Darius sat in his apartment, his thoughts swirling with the realization that everything he had was gone, he found himself wondering if it was too late to make things right. But deep down, he knew the answer. It was too late for him. The damage had been done, and now he had to live with the consequences. Simone was happy with Robert, and she had built a life without him. Darius had burned every bridge, and now he was left with the cold, empty reality of his choices. It had been months since Darius had last spoken to Simone, and the distance between them had only grown with time. Simone's life had moved forward, while his had become a series of unfortunate events. His career continued to slip through his fingers, and he couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that karma was closing in on him. He sat in his apartment, the phone buzzing again with yet another message from someone who had once been close to him. But the only thing he could think about was Simone, how she had moved on with Robert, someone who had been everything Darius hadn't been. He had watched from a distance as Simone's life flourished, while his crumbled to nothing. His mind wandered back to the moment he had rejected her. How could he have been so blind? The woman he had loved, the woman who had stood by him, had asked him to be a part of her future, and he had turned her down. Now Darius couldn't help but wonder if she had been better off without him. She was happy with Robert. She had everything she needed, and as much as he hated to admit it, Darius knew that he would never get her back. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had been the one who let her go. He had been the one who had ruined everything, and now there was no way to undo the damage. Simone had found happiness, and Darius had found loneliness. Darius had reached a breaking point. Everything had fallen apart. His career, his relationships, his sense of self. Every corner he turned seemed to bring him face to face with the truth. He had ruined his own life. The walls of his apartment seemed to close in on him, each tick of the clock echoing in the silence. He thought about Simone, about the life she was building with Robert, about the life he could have had if he hadn't rejected her. The regret was suffocating, and the weight of his mistakes was too much to bear. He had spent so many sleepless nights trying to figure out where he went wrong, but the answer had always been clear. He had let fear control his decisions, and now he was paying the price. In the weeks following his fall from grace, Darius had lost touch with the people who had once been his friends, his colleagues. The silence from them was deafening. He was alone, completely alone, and the realization stung more than he expected. As he sat on his couch, staring at the glowing screen of his phone, he saw a notification that made his heart skip. It was a message from Robert. "I know things ended badly between you and Simone, but she deserves to know the truth. I wanted you to hear it from me first." The words made Darius's pulse race. He wasn't sure what to expect, but the finality of it made him freeze. What could Robert possibly want to say to him? Darius quickly typed a response, his fingers trembling. "What do you mean? What truth?" The reply came almost instantly. "Simone is pregnant. I thought you should know." The shock hit him like a freight train. Simone was pregnant. The woman he had once wanted to spend his life with was going to have a family with someone else. In that moment, Darius understood something profound. Simone had moved on, truly and completely. The door had closed, and with Robert's words, the final truth slammed into him. He had missed his chance. The regret that had been gnawing at him for months was now fully realized. Darius sank back into the couch, his heart pounding in his chest. The universe had delivered its verdict, and he understood that there was no going back. Simone had found the happiness she deserved. It was time for him to accept the consequences of his actions. The truth had set in fully. Darius stood at the edge of his apartment, staring out at the city skyline one last time. He had lived here for years, but tonight it felt different. The weight of his actions, the consequences of his decisions, were all on his shoulders. Simone had moved on, and she was starting a family with Robert. It was a life Darius had once imagined, but now it felt like a dream that had slipped through his fingers. He couldn't change the past, but he had to face the present. In the weeks after Robert's message, Darius had tried to patch things up with his career, tried to reconnect with the people he had hurt, but everything seemed futile. His efforts were met with cold indifference from colleagues, and his phone remained silent except for the occasional message from people he barely knew. No one was interested in helping him rebuild the life he had destroyed. He thought back to his final conversation with Simone. She had told him, in her soft voice, that she needed more than he could give. He had rejected her proposal, and in doing so, he had rejected everything she was offering. It had been his choice to walk away from love, and now, love was thriving in a life that was no longer his. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was a call. It was Kira, Simone's best friend. Darius hesitated for a moment but then answered. "Darius?" Kira's voice was steady but filled with an emotion he couldn't quite place. "I just wanted to let you know that Simone and Robert are getting married next month." The words hit him like a punch in the stomach. He had known it was coming, but hearing it from Kira's voice made it real. I know," Darius said quietly, his voice cracking. "I wish them both the best." The line was silent for a moment before Kira spoke again, her tone softer this time. "Simone deserves someone who will truly love her, and I know Robert will. He's a good man, Darius. You had your chance." He hung up the phone, the weight of her words settling over him. Kira was right. Simone deserved someone who would cherish her. He had failed her, and now he had to accept the karmic consequences of his choices. As he stood there, looking out at the city, Darius realized that he would never get the life he had wanted, the life that was now Simone's and Robert's, but he had learned something valuable. Karma had worked its way through his life, teaching him the importance of love, commitment, and the consequences of neglecting both. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Darius finally understood the truth. Love was never something you could take for granted. If you enjoyed this twist-filled journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories by Lane for more unforgettable drama and surprises. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for watching, and remember, twists you will not see coming await in every chapter.